What's up, everyone? Blue here at Blue Bears Games. This week we are doing a custom build. This was an order that was one of the 6 that I talked about last week. Luckily, I was able to get it done, and I'll get it out to them before Christmas. And of course, I do a video on every single video or every deck that I make. So the request was Brudiclad, Telchor Engineer, and obviously nothing more than just that was given to me. So this is what I've made. Now, before I go into the deck and what Brudiclad does, I actually have a deck that I wanted to make for my own series where I was doing my 32 deck challenge. I've decided that I may not go with it just because the way that it plays out is not really my favorite style of play. However, it's not a bad deck. So let's talk about Brudiclad. So 1 blue, 1 red, 4 Veni for a 4/4. The ability is that creature tokens you control have haste, and then the second ability is that at the beginning of combat on your turn, you create a 2/1 blue mirror artifact creature token, and then you may choose a token you control, and if you do, each other token you control becomes a copy of that token. So now, this deck is going to have a couple of ways to win. First way to win is actually a deck that me and my buddy Nelson, we've made a deck like this, and I've actually had a deck like this on my channel before in a 60-card version, where we can create infinite mana, or you can do Mirrored Tribal Swarm. You can do a couple other things with it. You know, there's a couple other ways you can go about using mana. There's a couple ways you can go about doing combat, and then there's a couple little other tricks in there. So that's what Brudiclad does. I'll show you what I did with the lands, and the budget that I was given was 60. So not that much higher than my normal budget decks. So the deck that I put together was about $600 at the end of the tally. So this one took a hit on some things. So let's zoom out a little bit here, and I'll show you what I got. So the lands are pretty basic. We're in a dual color deck, or a 2-color deck, blue and red. Unfortunately, the budget didn't allow, specifically lately, the red-blue duals, the good ones, the rare ones, are a little pricey, so I couldn't really add them in. So this is what I came up with. Command Tower, all decks that are not my budget normal builds, I will put a Command Tower in if they're at least 2 colors. So then I've got comes into play tapped, and I know that they're not the greatest, but they work when needed. So we start off with the Snow one from Kaldheim, Volatile Fjord, Swiftwater Cliffs, Silver Bluff Bridge, and actually one of the reasons why this is in here is because it's an artifact land. There are some ways that you can search for artifacts, or at least you can upgrade to that later. It's indestructible, and it does 2 colors, so it's a natural fit. Prismari Campus, just because it has the scry ability. Is it Guildgate, Highland Lake, and is it Boiler Works, just because it fits the colors? And you never know, there's some shenanigans that you could pull off with it later. More artifact lands, because you may be able to do stuff with lands that are artifacts. Any artifacts that you can go search for, any artifacts that you can bring back from your grave, count with these. So Seat of the Synod, a Great Furnace for the red one, and then Darksteel Citadel, also indestructible, so you won't really have to worry about people blowing up your lands, which you don't. I mean, most people don't, but I include that in every deck, or at least try. Power Depot, another artifact land. This one comes into play tapped, unfortunately, as well. These 3 did not, so that was the bonus to them. This one comes into play tapped, adds a colorless, and then it also taps to add a mana of any color, but you can only spend that mana to cast artifact spells or activate abilities of artifacts, which there will be some things in here that may matter. Buried Ruin, you can get an artifact back from your grave. Tomb of the Spirit Dragon, because most of the permanents in this deck are colorless, not all, but most, so you'll be able to gain some life. And remember, life is a resource. The higher you can get it, the better off you are. And one of the things that I don't normally do, but I wanted to for this deck, was I threw Urzatron in here, which is the Urza's Mine, the Urza's Power Plant, and the Urza's Tower. You're not really most likely going to assemble all 3, but you never know. It depends on how the game plays out. And then, of course, I got a Terramorphic Expanse Involving Wilds, just for, going to get mana fixing that you need. It's not fetch lands per se, they're the crappy ones, but at least they're a little bit better than none. And the rest are islands and mountains, and I believe it's 8, but again, like I say in every video, if you want to know the exact amount, you can go ahead and there's a link in the description to my MTG Goldfish account that has this deck up there, and it's just called Brudiclad Customer Build. As far as the ramp goes for this deck, and that's what a lot of people really want to do, is ramp into things, because especially with Brudiclad's 6 to cast, there are 2 cards in here. They're not great, they're good, but they're not like, I don't have Mox Diamonds or anything like that, but I got a Soul Ring and a Mind Stone. Soul Ring will help because if you first turn that out, you'll be able to get other things out. And remember, we're in Mirror Tribal, and Mirror have one innate ability, kind of like the elves do in Magic, where they can produce mana. So the ramp here is going to be a partial mana rock / artifact creatures that produce mana, just because that's what Mirror do. So Soul Ring and Mind Stone are the 2 non-Mirror versions of it, and then we'll go into the creatures, which will have more. All right. So we'll start on Iron Mirror and Silver Mirror. A Mirror Retriever. I'll have some more mana dorks in a little bit, but Mirror Retriever is there just to get artifacts back. You can technically loop multiple Mirror Retrievers if you have the ability to do so. There are a couple of cards in Magic that allow you that when the creature dies, return an artifact to from your graveyard to your hand, and you can loop Mirror Retrievers if you had the ability to have multiples, and in some instances in this deck, you may be able to do that. Mirror Sire, so this deck revolves around a couple of things. One of them is tokens, and being able to create tokens that you can copy later or change things to is good. So this one, when it dies, it creates one of those tokens. Perilous Mirror, when it dies, it deals 2 damage to anything you want, and again, you can possibly loop this. I believe I have one card in here that brings it back from your graveyard to your hand itself. So looping, dealing damage to things, always a good positive thing. Seal Overseer, because most of your creatures, not all but most, are going to be artifact creatures. So you can just tap it and put a +1/+1 counter on each artifact creature that you control. The Mirror Superion, 2 to cast for a 5/6, but it can only be cast from mana that were produced by creatures. So keep that in mind as well. Palladium Mirror, another mana dork, 3 to cast for a 2/2. It taps to add 2 colorless mana. Mirror Welder is actually one of the more important pieces of this deck. It's 30 cast for a 1/4. It's got a nice big butt. It has imprint, which is to say that you have to do something to get something. So you have to exile an artifact card from a graveyard. Any graveyard, could be your opponent's, could be yours. And then Mirror Welder has all activated abilities of all cards exiled with it, and you can continue doing so multiple times. This guy can have up to 700 abilities if it plays out that way, so keep that in mind as well. The Propagator, so he creates tokens of himself. That means that the token copies actually create tokens as well, so you can have a swarm of Mirror Propagators if you want. Ally Mirror, another one of the mana dorks. He taps to add a mana of any color. The Galvanizer is actually one of the cornerstones of this deck, and it's actually how you get infinite mana. If you've seen that video that I made about infinite mana mirror, probably 3 years ago, you'll understand it, but I'll explain it. Okay, so how this works is you're going to start with the Galvanizer on the field, and then a mirror or 2 mirror that can produce at least 2 mana. From there, you're going to duplicate or create a copy of a Galvanizer, giving you a total of 2 Galvanizers and either a Palladium Mirror or 2 mirror that can produce at least 2 mana. You're going to tap the Palladium Mirror to add 2 mana to your mana pool. Then you're going to tap the Galvanizer using one of those mana, and it'll untap all mirror, which in this case is a Palladium Mirror. You're going to tap the mirror again, netting you 3 mana. You're going to use one of those mana to tap the second Galvanizer, untapping all mirror. That includes the other Galvanizer and a Palladium Mirror, and you rinse and repeat, and that should equal infinite mana. If you have any questions, let me know, but for now we're going to move on. Foundry Inspector. So not a mana dork, but a cost reducer. There are a few in this deck. It was another way that I got the cost down mana-wise. So it's 3 to cast, it's a 3/2, and then all artifacts you cast cost 1 less to cast. There's a couple of them. Shimmer Mirror gives all artifacts flash, so you can do stuff on your opponent's turns. Chief of Foundry. Oh, you know what? I'm going to do both these together. So I forgot to add, Mirror Galvanizer has another thing that it can do. It's also a buff for other mirrors, so if you wanted to do a swarm, because remember, Brudiclad creates mirror tokens, if you wanted to swarm, he buffs them. So, and then so does Chief of the Foundry. So Chief of the Foundry says other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. Jorah's Familiar makes all your historic spells cost 1 less to cast, and historic spells are artifacts, legends, and sagas, and that includes Brudiclad as being cost 1 less, so that's always a bonus as well. Mirror Enforcer has affinity for artifacts, so it costs 1 less to cast for each artifact in play. He's a 4/4. He's in here because he's a giant mirror that sometimes you just need. The Battlesphere, so he does a couple things for you. He's a 7 to cast 4/7. When he enters the battlefield, create 4/1/1 mirror tokens. That's always good for Brudiclad because you can create more and more and more. You probably don't want to, you want to change the 1/1s to 2/1s, obviously. He also has, whenever it attacks, you may then tap X, untap the mirror you control, and if you do, the Battlesphere gets +X/+0 until end of turn, and deals X damage to the player or planeswalker it's attacking, so it gets bigger and deals damage directly. Hulking Metamorph, so it's 9 to cast, he's an artifact, so the cost reduction in here, plus your mana dorks, plus your ability to go infinite, makes it not as painful. He has Prototype, which means that instead you can cast him for 2 blue and 2. So if you cast him for 9, he's a 7/7. If you cast him for 2 blue and 2, he's a 3/3. And he has the ability that you may have him enter the battlefield as a copy of an artifact or creature you control, except it's an artifact creature in addition to its other types, and power and toughness are equal to its power and toughness. So he actually is a clone of sorts, so if you need to make a bigger mirror Galvanizer, you can for 4. He'll be a 3/3, or you can cast it for 9 and make it a 7/7 mirror Galvanizer. That gives all other mirror +1/+1. So, good inclusion here. Glad that I opened it in my brother's War set booster that I still haven't finished. By the time this video comes out, though, I'll probably have finished that box. The next card is Desolation Twin. It's an odd inclusion because it's not an artifact, so it doesn't get any reduction cost benefits. This was something that the person who purchased the deck had mentioned, and I was like, all right, I'll throw something in there that's like that. So the thing is that it's 10 to cast for a 10/10. When it comes into play, you create a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi token. So he thought it would be funny if he could have the 10/10 out with Brudiclad and a bunch of tokens and make all of them 10/10s. So I decided to include it for fun. Ethereum Sculptor, 1/2 for 2. It reduces the cost of all your artifacts by 1. So again, another cost reduction. Master of Ethereum, the 3 cast star. His power and toughness are equal to the number of artifacts you control. This deck is mostly artifacts, so it should be pretty big. And then again, another artifacts creatures you control get +1/+1, another Anthem. Sarcomite Mirror, this one's in here for, if you can create tokens of them, great, and then use them to sacrifice to draw cards, that's a bonus. If not, you can make them gain flying, lots of things you can do there. Fairy Mechanist, oh, I forgot to mention, also, these are artifact creatures, so that's important because their cost is reduced as well. Fairy Mechanist, also an artifact creature, is a 4 to cast 3/2 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 3 cards of your library, you may reveal an artifact from among them and put it in your hand, and then put the rest on the bottom of your library, so it digs for cards that you need. Reckless Fireweaver, non-artifact creature. Boy, would I love if this was. It's a 2 cast 1/3. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, that includes, it doesn't have to be cast, so it's whenever one enters. So if you create a token and the token's an artifact creature, like with Brudiclad, the ability goes off and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. And the important thing here is it's each opponent. And the reason why this is included is because the amount of artifacts in this deck are pretty high. His casting cost is pretty low. And if you can create tokens of him and then start getting other artifacts into play, it can get pretty nuts. Togo, Goblin Weaponsmith, I was kind of back and forth on this one. It's a 3 cast 2/2, has landfall, so whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, you create a colorless equipment artifact token named Rock with equipped creature has 1 and tap it, sacrifice Rock. This creature deals 2 damage to any target, and it equips for 1. And the reason why that's in there is because it creates tokens pretty much for free when it's out. You just have to play land, so you get something that you can change the token to something else if you want to. Or, the good thing about Rock is it deals damage all by its own. Penregan Strong Bull. So it's a 3 cast, 2/3. You can pay 1 and sacrifice an artifact, and there is no tap here, and that's why this is included, because you can do it as many times as you need to. And then he'll get the benefit of +1/+1 until end of turn and deal damage to each opponent. So you can play land, put one of those rocks into play, you can sacrifice it for 2, or you can sacrifice it to make him bigger, attack with him, and deal damage to each opponent. So Hoarding Ogre. So 4 to cast 3/3, whenever he attacks, roll a d20. I don't really like these cards all that much, but what he does is pretty good. So on a 1 to 9 on the roll, you can get a treasure token, which again creates an artifact token that you need. So that will set off the Fire Weaver. It'll help Brudiclad, all those things. It also can be mana ramp, so it's a bunch of things. On a 10 to 19, you create 2 treasure tokens, and then on a nat 20, you get 3. So Enthusiastic Mechanist, another one of those cost reducers. So it's a 2 to cast, 2/2 flyer, a red and a blue, and he reduces the artifacts cost by 1. And then the last creature is Jorah Weatherlight Captain. So 4 to cast for a 3/3, and whenever you cast a historic spell, you draw a card. So historic spells, again, are artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. There are no sagas here, but there are some legendaries. This counts too. It's an artifact. It's an artifact creature, so every artifact and every artifact creature you do. But I believe Togo is legendary. I believe Brudiclad also. I mean, of course, he's a legendary, and I think that's about it as far as legendaries go. It looks like it, but either way. So, and every time you cast one, you draw a card. So it's good, repeatable card draw, especially in a deck that's based on all artifacts. Up next, we got some spells. These spells are going to be card draw spells that'll have benefits that are associated with artifacts. So we start off with Artificer's Epiphany. You draw 2 cards, and if you control no artifacts, discard a card for 3. So basically, it's an instant that draws 2 cards in this deck. Compulsive Research, 3 to cast. Target player draws 3 cards, and then that player discards 2 cards unless they discard a land card. Most likely, you're going to have extra lands, so you'll just ditch an extra land. Thirst for Knowledge, same thing as Artificer's Epiphany for the most part. It's 3 to cast, it's an instant, just like Artificer's Epiphany. This one lets you draw 3 cards, and then you discard 2 cards unless you discard an artifact, which you should have plenty of. That includes those artifact lands that I was just showing you earlier. Forging the Anchor, so 3 to cast sorcery, you look at 5 cards at the top of your library, and you reveal any number of artifacts from among them, and put those revealed cards in your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library. So you could hit really well and hit 5. Now, I don't have an upgrade section for this deck, but one of the things I would suggest, maybe possibly, is a Sensei's Divining Top. I mean, that should go in almost every deck, it's just good utility. But you can manipulate the top of your deck to be 5 artifacts, hit with this and get 5 cards in your hand. Thoughtcast, Affinity for Artifacts, so it costs 1 less for each artifact in play, so you can get it down to 1 blue and draw 2 cards. Seize the Spoils. So a couple of these they're all going to be the same. The next 5 cards are going to be the red looting cards. So Seize the Spoils, Honor the God Pharaoh, Big Score, Pirate's Pillage, and Unexpected Windfall. They all do the draw 2 or discard a card, draw 2 cards, but then they all do something else. They create a treasure token. They create an amass token. This one creates 2 treasure tokens. This one creates 2 treasure tokens, and this one also creates 2 treasure tokens. So it's creating tokens to help with Brudiclad. They're treasure tokens, so they can either be changed over with Brudiclad, or they can be used for ramp. So that's what their inclusion is for. Some defense. Defensively, there's not a lot here. So it's going to be counter magic and some artifact removal. That's about the best you're going to get out of blue and red. So Annul, again, I've said this a couple of videos ago, is actually a pretty good card in Commander. For 1 blue, you can counter artifact or enchantment. You can stop somebody's turn 1 if you get in your opening hand. You can stop somebody's turn 1 Soul Ring that could turn into a real big catastrophe. Essence Scatter, counter a creature spell. Negate, counter a non-creature spell. These are to help stop other people from going off. Disdainful Stroke, counter target spell, convert a mana cost 4 or greater. That definitely is a good thing against, say, like Brudiclad, where it's more than 4 to cast. Disruption Protocol. It's 2 blue. As an additional cost to cast this, you have to tap an untapped artifact or pay 1 and just counter a spell. Rebuild. So defensively, so this is where it's a little weird. So I put Rebuild in here for a couple reasons. You can save yourself, or you can stop somebody else from doing something that they're doing if they're also playing artifacts. It returns all artifacts to their owner's hand, or you can cycle it away if none of that matters to you. So it's useful no matter what. So save yourself by returning all your stuff if somebody does a board wipe, or return somebody else's artifacts if they're taking over the board. So it gets around that whole indestructible thing, so you can get them back out of play. Aetherize returns all attacking creatures to their owner's hands. Vandal Blast, again, red's really only destruction or defensively, besides damage, is destroying artifacts, not really much else. So this can destroy all your opponent's artifacts if you need to. And then, of course, Shattering Pulse, because you can buy it back and play it multiple times. And in a deck where you're going to be able to create a lot of mana if you get the setup right, not bad to have a buyback on something like that. You can cast it, buy it back, cast it, buy it back. Utility-wise, that's the last section we've got for you. Quasi-Duplicate, creating a copy of a card in play. So it creates a token that's a copy of target creature you control, and you can jumpstart it, so you can do it more than once. Cackling Counterpart, same thing. You can do this twice. Put a token on the battlefield that's a copy of a creature you control. They are identical for the most part, except for one's a flashback for a lot more and one's a jumpstart for the same cost. This is to, most of the time, you're going to make a second copy of Galvanizer. Saheeli's Artistry, so this one's 6 to cast, and this one you can do 2. So you can either create a token that's a copy of target artifact, or you can create a token that's a copy of target creature, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types, or you can do both. So you can make 2 copies. So while these are 3 and they do 1, and you can buy them back for, or a jumpstart is essentially buy back with a different cost. You can buy it back for 7 here or 3 here plus a card. This one's 6 and you can make 2 copies. What are you going to do with all that mana? You're going to fireball them off the board. I've got 3 spells here. specifically for that reason. All three of them can basically, well, this one can win you the game. This one can win you the game, and this one can take somebody off the board. So Fireball can be split. Rolling Thunder naturally just splits because it just divides damage any way you want. And then Volcanic Eyes, it does it to 1. So you can create infinite mana with 2 Galvanizers when you've created a copy, and then you can just burn people off the board. So that's where I said earlier at the beginning of the video, you can either do, tribal, mere tribal combat damage win, or you can do infinite mana and put them into a Fireball. The rest of the utility is a Mere Reservoir. I said earlier that you can probably get some things back and repeatedly do things. This is the way. It's actually a mana rock, but for Mirror only. So it's ready to cast. It taps to add 2 mana, 2 colorless mana, and you can only spend that mana to cast Mirror spells or activate abilities of Mirror. The good thing about that is that it also works with Galvanizer's ability, so you can float the 2 mana to untap at least 2 times. And then for 3, you can tap it and return a Mirror from your graveyard to your hand. So if the Galvanizer gets killed, you can bring it back, and you can do that with a bunch of them. Mimic that. So these 2 cards are specifically to help get the double Mirror Galvanizer out. This one is 3 to cast. You imprint, which means that it has an ability that needs to be imprinted. Whenever a non-token creature dies, say your Galvanizer, you may then exile that card, and if you do, return each other card exiled with Mimic that to its owner's hand. So you can use this until Galvanizer comes out, and then you can use it when it dies, and then make copies of other creatures. So that's what it does. You pay 3, tap it, and create a token that's a copy of the card exiled with Mimic that. It gains haste, and then you exile it at the beginning of the next end step. So you can make Mirror Galvanizer tokens that you can copy. You can take Brudiclad and turn all the copies of all of your stuff into it, so when this one goes away, or when the copy that was created with Mimic Effect goes away, you can still have Mirror Galvanizers out and still go infinite. We're giving Restoration. Obviously, this goes in any deck based on artifacts. You just return 1 from your graveyard to the battlefield, no questions asked. Curse of Opulence, so it's 1 to cast, it's a curse, so you have to curse somebody with it. And then, whenever the enchanted player is attacked, create a colorless artifact named Gold, which is basically a treasure token, and then you can sacrifice the artifact like it's a treasure token to add 1 mana of any color to mana pool, and each opponent that attacks that player also does the same. So, helps create tokens, could create a mass amount of tokens if given the right opportunity, and then Brudiclad can change them during the combat. Pia's Revolution, this one's actually a pretty cool techie one, so it's 3 to cast for an enchantment. Whenever a non-token artifact is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you can return it to your hand unless an opponent that you choose has it deal 3 damage to them. Brass's Bounty, also another one that's an auto-include in Brudiclad. 7 to cast. I mean, I know it's high mana cost, but whatever. For each land that you control, you create a colorless treasure token. That, you know what a treasure token does. And the last card is Mask of Avacyn, only because monetarily the deck went over the $60 budget, and I was trying to find Swiftfoot Boots. I don't have any extras anyway, but it would have taken the deck well above, and I mean well above the threshold for the $60. So, and that's the deck in a nutshell. It's a pretty fun deck. It has a couple of different ways that you can win with, and when it gets going, it really gets going. So I've already mailed the deck off to its new owner. Hopefully he has some fun with it. He's already talked to me about a couple different things he can do to upgrade it as he goes, so hopefully he has some fun with that. So that's the video I have for you this week. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, or just want to talk about the deck or any of the other decks and videos that I create, you can go ahead and contact me at bluebearsgames.online on Facebook. You can email me at bluebearsgames@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you when I have an opportunity. Or you can leave a comment in the section below, and I'll get back to you in that way. And then if you want to talk further after that, you can go ahead and contact me one of the other 2 ways. On top of that, if you're looking to help support the channel, there are a couple ways you can do so. The first way is actually just out of generosity. You can go ahead and do some donations to me. And the way you can do that is through PayPal at paypal.me/BlueBearsGames, at Venmo at BlueBearsGames, or through Cash App at $BlueBearsGames. The second way that you could help support the channel, this one actually gets you something for your money. You can go ahead and take a look at all the decks that I've made, and you can make a purchase of 1 or 2, or maybe even 5. I have 60-card decks available for sale, and I also have Commander decks available for sale. So if you're looking at them, you can go ahead and take a look at any of my stuff on the Facebook page or through the Facebook Marketplace. They're all available there. You can see the logo that you need to look for, and all those are available for purchase. You can contact me at any time, and we'll go ahead and talk about how you can acquire one of those. And the last option is the freest of the 3 options. You can do me the favor of subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. That way, when I get to my 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours, somebody else will be paying for the bill. You can also like the video. Apparently, the analytics show that the more people who like your video, the more viewed it gets. So that would help me as well. Or you can share it out on your social medias, whatever one you have, and other people will eventually start subscribing and watching more videos. So all 3 options are great and will help support the channel. That is my time for the week. I want to thank you for watching. Please join me again next week for another deck build video, and I will see you all then. Have a good week.